Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the April My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. In this month's kit, we received some papers and embellishments from the gorgeous Prima Marketing in Full Bloom collection. I have to say this is one of my favorite collections in a long time. And when I saw this piece of pattern paper with the huge, gorgeous butterfly on it, I couldn't wait to get started on creating a layout. I knew that I wanted to make the butterfly a little bit more prominent, so I couldn't decide if I should cut the butterfly out of the pattern paper that it's on and create my own mixed media background, or if I should use the background that's there. I finally decided that I was going to use the gorgeous background that was already there because, frankly, I can't create a background that's more beautiful than this. But I did do a few things to the butterfly and to the paper so that the butterfly would stand out a little bit more. The first thing that I did was I cut some slits using a craft knife on the top of both of the wings. My thought was that I could tuck some flowers into those slits and help to separate the butterfly from the background, and that would make it look a little bit more prominent on the page. I also wanted to add a little bit of my own touch to the background, so I'm using some Distress Oxides and this stencil. I like to make stencils using cut files and the plastic dividers for loose leaf binders. The stencils are a little floppier than the kind that you buy, but I find that they do the trick and I am able to use them successfully on my layouts. So whenever I see a cut file that I really like, I will make a stencil out of it on my silhouette cameo. So to add some flowers to the background, I'm using some Distress Oxide in Dusty Concord. And I'm using a blending brush. I've had these blending brushes in my stash for a while. I ordered them because I saw a lot of other people using them, and then I really didn't use them. I usually use the Ranger daubers, but I found that it was a great tool to use for putting some stenciling in the background. I found that using this blending brush, it was very easy for me to vary the pressure that I put on the brush, and that allowed me to create some flowers that were a little bit darker and some that were a little bit lighter. In general, I wanted to put the darker flowers closest to the butterfly and the lightest ones further away. It didn't work out that way in all instances, but I think you could see that that was what I had in mind. In general, I didn't want the flowers to get too dark because I didn't want to take away from the butterfly. I also added another shade of Distress Oxide. This is shaded lilac. I thought it was a nice complement to the Dusty Concord color. And I put just a few flowers in this color just because I wanted to have a little bit of variation in the background. I'm really glad that I finally tried these blending brushes out. I think that if I had used the dauber, the flowers might have gotten very dark much more quickly. I thought that I had a lot of control over the blending brush. Once again, I'm trying to make that butterfly stand out a little bit more, so I decided that I was going to use some colored pencils and go around the outside of the butterfly. Years ago, I used to love drawing with colored pencils, so I still had a set of colored pencils from Spectracolor. I first used the color purple. I used the colored pencil to darken all around the outside edge of the butterfly, and then I also used it in the center just to give a little bit more definition to the body of the butterfly. Once I started drawing with this colored pencil, I found it very hard to put down. I really enjoyed adding some of my own touches to the butterfly. You can see I didn't change anything. I'm just really shading and providing a little bit more definition. I really love contrast in artwork. Subtlety is nice too, but the way that I create art, I really like there to be big differences between the values and tones of the different elements on the page so that they'll stand out. So that was what I had in mind. I really wanted this butterfly to stand out quite a bit from the background. And then as I was working, I incorporated a second color, which is violet, which was similar, but it had a little bit more of a reddish tone than the purple did. I believe that this is the first time I've ever used colored pencils on a scrapbooking layout. I might have forgotten something. I've been scrapbooking for a very long time, but if I did, I certainly don't remember doing it. And it was definitely fun, and I think that I achieved my goal of making the butterfly a little bit more prominent, and I'm glad that I used the background that was there because I absolutely love all of the shades of purple and that beautiful blue color that's in the background. I think that's my very favorite shade of blue. Here I'm very lightly outlining the flowers that are layered on top of the butterfly. So now I'm going to add my photo. I knew that I wanted to add a small photo to this layout. I love the butterfly, and I think it's okay to cover up some of it, but I really didn't want to cover up too much of it. But luckily, I had a photo that was just the right size for this spot. I used my Creative Memories circle cutters that I love to use, and I cut out my photo. I also cut out a white mat to go behind it, and then I put some foam behind it and attached it down to the right side of the butterfly. One of the things that I loved about this paper collection was that there were tons and tons of images to fussy cut out, and I love fussy cutting out flowers and using them on my layouts. So I'm also using some of the dimensional flowers. First, I'll put down the fussy cut flowers, and then I'll add those dimensional flowers later. And here I am tucking those fussy cut flowers into those slits that I made earlier at the top of the butterfly. And I didn't mention that earlier, I was using some Distress ink and Vintage Photo to ink the edges of all of the flowers. There was already a cluster of flowers in the lower left-hand side of the butterfly. I decided that I was going to expand that a little bit with some of those flowers that I cut out. After I placed all of the flowers down, I was happy with the way that they looked, and I decided that it was time to pick a few flowers and add a little bit of dimension to them by adding some fun foam to the back of them. I picked this one large daisy in the upper right-hand corner to pop up, and then I decided that this larger cluster in the lower left-hand corner would look nice with some dimension. Then I popped up one smaller flower on foam, and then I decided it was time to start attaching all of those flowers down. And using some ATG adhesive, I went all around the layout and I attached down any of those fussy cut flowers that I hadn't already attached down. Now I'm going to be using some of the dimensional flowers. Look how absolutely gorgeous these flowers are. I am absolutely in love with them. I not only love those larger colorful flowers, but I really loved the smaller daisies. They matched in so well with the background, but they added a little bit of texture and dimension, and I thought they were a really nice complement for the colorful flowers that are on the layout. I used quite a few of those daisies on this layout. We got a big pack of them, so I was able to use quite a few of them on this layout, and I still had plenty left for some of the other layouts that I created this month. As I was attaching the flowers down to the layout, I found another flower that I thought would look nice, popped up on some foam. And then there was a very small cluster of flowers. I believe I fussy cut that out too. I placed that on the left-hand wing. I love those little flowers among the larger flowers. And then I used some gel medium to attach all of the dimensional flowers down. Since I've started my YouTube channel, by far the most common question that I've been asked in the comments is, how do I get my layouts into page protectors with the dimensional flowers? Since I've been asked that so often, I thought that I would mention that I have never had trouble getting any of my scrapbook layouts into page protectors. I know some people don't like dimensional layouts, just like some people don't like the mixed media layouts because the paper will buckle. Everybody has different tastes, but for me, these dimensional flowers add so much beauty to the page, and I absolutely love them. And I think that's one of the great things about scrapbooking. Everybody could bring their own styles and their own interests and their own process to the table and create beautiful layouts that look very different. So now I'm adding a few more flowers. As if the layout wasn't busy enough, I decided to add a little cluster in the lower right-hand corner. I just thought that would help to balance the layout out a little bit. I'm using some heavy gesso in white and one of my ancient bristle brushes, and I'm dabbing the gesso onto the edges of all of the petals on the larger flowers. I add a few touches of gesso to some of the daisies, but you really can't see the gesso because the daisies are white and the gesso is white, but I wanted to just try it out and just see if it made an impact. It didn't turn out to be very noticeable, but I thought that it was worth a try. I was thinking that everything on the layout has a lot of layers and flowers, and the photo looked kind of plain, so I found a doily that was the right size and I put that behind my photo. I wanted to add a few more flowers below the yellow and pink flowers in the lower left-hand corner. So I fussy cut a few flowers out of a larger fussy cut cluster, and then I tucked those into the larger cluster on the page. Then I relocated some of the flowers that I had in the lower left-hand corner to make them closer to that cluster. I ripped the paper in a little spot, but it's okay. I ended up covering it up with some other fussy cut flowers. Before I address that though, I wanted to cover up a gap between those fussy cut flowers that I just attached down and the dimensional flowers. So I cut out a flower, popped it up on some foam, and I layered that flower into the cluster. That cluster is getting bigger and bigger all the time. And then I fussy cut out a little flower so that I could put it over that torn area. And I fussy cut out a few more because it would look kind of silly if there was just one little fussy cut flower there. And I ended up using these two flowers rather than that single flower. I'll remove that in a little bit. And then I decided that I wanted to include some birds on the layout. So I put one in the upper left-hand corner and one in the cluster on the lower right-hand side of the layout. And you could see that I added some flowers in the upper right-hand corner to balance out those flowers I added in the opposite corner that covered up that tear. My title is going to be Let Yourself Bloom. I cut this out of one of the journaling cards that we got in the kit. I used a corner rounder and I rounded all the corners. I wanted to put some yellow paper behind it. So after I cut out a rectangle that was the right size from one of the pattern papers, I decided that I was going to bump up the color a little bit. So I used some squeezed lemonade and fossilized amber distress oxides to do that. And now I'm using my Distress ink in Vintage Photo, and I ink the edge of the rectangle as well as the sentiment. I'm layering the sentiment on top of the yellow paper. I wanted to give the sentiment a little bit of dimension, so I first attached it down to a piece of thick white cardstock, something that I really like to do when I add foam to some of the elements on my page. The cardstock will make the sentiment a little bit more sturdy. I don't find it necessary to put the cardstock behind smaller embellishments, but when I'm putting something that's this large on the background and popping it up, I do like to add that cardstock. That way I know that the sentiment won't bend over time. I wanted to add a little bit more embellishment to my photo. I already added the doily, but I thought that these two die cuts from the die cut pack would look nice layered on top of each other and kind of cascade along the left-hand side of the photo. I added a little bit of foam to the back of the die cut that I put on the top. That way there would be a little bit of separation between the two die cuts. I decided to rotate one of the die cuts in the upper left-hand corner. I'm sorry, my voice might sound different because I switched rooms and I'm in a much smaller space, and that can make a difference in how my voice sounds on the recording. So I added a little butterfly to the title, and then I decided to add some pearls all around the photo. I'm using strips of self-adhesive 3mm pearls. I get these from the Eyelet and Brad outlet, I believe that it's called. I get it at the scrapbooking conventions I go to each summer. And then I was thinking that I could add a little bird on top of the title so that there would be 3 birds on the page. And now I'm adding some pearls to my dimensional flowers. I love adding pearls to them. I think it just gives them a nice, fancy, finished look. I'm using all different shades of purple, from a very light lilac to a dark colored purple. I like to use glossy accents to attach these down to the layout. I think that's, for me, the best adhesive that I have encountered to get these pearls to stick down to the layout permanently. I also like to add pearls of different sizes. I think that makes a really big difference in how the pearls look on the layout. I wasn't quite done. I thought that the layout needed a little bit of green added into it. So I used an unbranded die that was in my stash, and I cut out a whole bunch of branches. I used some pieces of pattern paper that were left over from another layout that I made this month, but I wanted the color green to be a little bit brighter. So I first coated each of the branches with some peeled paint Distress Oxide, and then after I did that, I added some mowed lawn Distress Oxide on top. And then because I have inked most of the other elements on the page with the Distress ink and Vintage Photo, I did the same thing to the branches. And I'm going to tuck all of those branches into the floral clusters that I have on the layout. I cut almost all of them shorter because I didn't want the branches to be very long. I just wanted them to add a little bit to each of the clusters, and I wanted to add a touch of green to the layout. At this point, I have 4 clusters, and I used the leaves to embellish just those 4 clusters. I didn't put them anywhere else on the layout. I'm not going to show you all of the footage of me adding them to the clusters, but I took a little bit of time to cut them shorter and arrange them until I was happy with their placement. The reason that I chose this particular branch die is because most of the elements on the page are on the larger side, and the leaves on this branch die were very small, so I thought it would be a good complement to the larger elements on the page. And once all the branches are arranged, I attached everything down using some gel glue. I don't cover the entire back of the die cut with the glue. I just put some where the branch begins and where it's tucked into the cluster. That way the branches slightly lift off the page most of the time, and I think that that gives the branches and the clusters a little bit more of a natural look. I forgot that initially I only put the lighter colored purple pearls down on the flowers. This is when I add some small dark purple pearls to each of my flowers. And I just add a couple of them to each flower. And once again, I'm using glossy accents to hold all of them in place. Those dark purple pearls are the final touch. The layout is complete. Here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. I really hope that you enjoyed watching. I want to say how much I love having a YouTube channel because I get to hear from so many wonderful scrapbookers who watch my videos, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for watching, for liking, and for all of those really thoughtful and uplifting comments. They really mean a lot to me. Please check out the My Creative Scrapbook kits. The link is in the description box as always. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.